The harsh autumn rain battered the windows of Thornfield Manor as Sophia Keating stared at the letter that had arrived with the morning post. Her trembling hands crushed the edges of the fine stationery, the black ink blurring as a tear escaped and fell upon the page. Left with no choice but to terminate your position, circumstances of your father's disgrace, unsuitable influence upon impressionable young ladies. She folded the letter and placed it in her lap, her back ramrod straight as she had been taught a governess's should always be. Even now, when no one was watching. Even now, when her life was crumbling around her. The Viscount's family had been kind enough to provide her with a month's wages, but not kind enough to overlook the scandal that had erupted in London when her father's embezzlement scheme had been discovered. Not kind enough to believe that the daughter could be different from the father. Miss Keating. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, appeared at the doorway of the small sitting room. "The carriage is prepared. Lord and Lady Pembroke request that you depart before their guests arrive for afternoon tea." Sophia nodded, rising to her feet with as much dignity as she could muster. "Of course. I would not wish to embarrass them with my continued presence." "Where will you go, child?" Mrs. Winters asked, her voice softening. She had been kind to Sophia during her 2 years as governess to the Pembroke daughters. "My cousin in Yorkshire has offered me temporary lodging," Sophia replied, not mentioning that the cousin had made it quite clear the arrangement was to be brief. No more than a fortnight while Sophia secured another position, a nearly impossible task now that her family name had been tarnished. The truth was, Sophia had nowhere to go. At 26, with no fortune and a disgraced name, her prospects were dim indeed. But she would rather starve than admit defeat or beg for charity. Her father's mistakes were not her own, though society seemed determined to punish her for them nonetheless. As the carriage pulled away from Thornfield Manor, Sophia watched the grand house disappear behind the curtain of rain. She had believed that with hard work and propriety she could overcome the disadvantages of her birth. That a woman of modest means could carve out a respectable life through her own merits. How foolish she had been! The train journey to Yorkshire was long and uncomfortable, but it provided Sophia time to form a plan. Her cousin's home would offer temporary shelter, but she needed employment, quickly. The last of her savings would barely sustain her for a month. Disembarking at the small station in the village of Millfield, Sophia was struck by how different it was from the bustling streets of London. The air was cleaner, the pace slower, and the mist that clung to the rolling hills lent the landscape an ethereal quality. "Miss Keating." A thin man in a coachman's uniform approached. "I'm from Ravenswood. The Earl sent me to collect you." Sophia blinked in confusion. "I believe there's been a mistake. My cousin, Mrs. Eleanor Bailey, was to send someone." "No mistake, miss. Mrs. Bailey resides at Ravenswood Cottage on the Earl's estate. The Earl instructed that visitors are to be brought directly to the main house before proceeding to the cottages." He lifted her trunk effortlessly. "Estate policy, miss." Too tired to argue, Sophia followed him to a handsome black carriage bearing a coat of arms she didn't recognize. As they traveled the winding country road, anxiety gnawed at her. What sort of reception awaited her at Ravenswood? Would the Earl, whoever he was, know of her father's disgrace? Would she be turned away before even reaching her cousin's door? The carriage rounded a bend, and Sophia gasped. Rising from the mist like something from a dark fairy tale stood Ravenswood Manor. Gothic spires reached toward the darkening sky, and gargoyles leered from rain-slicked rooftops. The grey stone seemed to absorb what little light remained in the day. "Imposing, isn't it?" the coachman remarked. "Been in the Parnell family for generations." Parnell. The name stirred a memory. Not the Earl of Ravenswood. The very same. Though most folks around here just call him the Scarred Earl. The coachman lowered his voice. They say he hasn't left the estate in 5 years, not since the fire that killed his wife and left him changed. The carriage pulled to a stop before massive oak doors. A butler emerged, his expression as somber as the architecture. "Miss Keating, I presume?" he asked, gesturing for her to follow him inside. "The Earl wishes to speak with all visitors to the estate." A formality, nothing more. Sophia stepped into a cavernous entrance hall. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her as she moved across the marble floor. A massive staircase curved upward into shadows, and somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed the hour. "Wait here," the butler instructed, leaving her alone in the oppressive silence. Minutes passed. Sophia fought the urge to flee. This house felt like a mausoleum, preserving grief rather than celebrating life. Just as she had decided to find her own way to her cousin's cottage, footsteps echoed from the shadows of the upper landing. A tall figure descended the stairs. As he stepped into the light, Sophia struggled to maintain her composure. Lord Thomas Parnell, the Earl of Ravenswood, was a study in contrasts. His left side reflected the man he must have been before tragedy struck, handsome features, strong jawline, and one piercing blue eye. But the right side of his face bore the map of his suffering, a network of angry red scars that pulled his features into a permanent grimace. A black patch covered what had once been his right eye. "Miss Keating." His voice was deep, cultured, but raspy, as though damaged by smoke. "I understand you are to stay with Mrs. Bailey." Sophia curtsied, willing herself not to stare. "Yes, my lord. I apologize for the intrusion. How long do you intend to remain at Ravenswood?" There was no warmth in his question, merely cold efficiency. "A fortnight at most, my lord. Until I secure new employment." Something flickered in his one good eye. "And what employment do you seek?" "I was a governess, my lord." She hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path forward. "Though I fear my prospects in that regard are limited due to recent circumstances." "Your father's disgrace." It wasn't a question. Sophia felt her cheeks burn. "News travels quickly. I subscribe to the London papers. Your father's trial was well documented." He studied her with unnerving intensity. "Do you share his flexible approach to other people's property, Miss Keating?" The insult stung, but Sophia had endured worse in recent weeks. "I do not, my lord. Nor do I share his belief that one's worth is measured by material possessions." A harsh sound escaped him, something between a laugh and a cough. "How fortunate for you. Society, however, will not make such fine distinctions between father and daughter." "I am well aware of society's limitations, Lord Ravenswood." She met his gaze steadily. "Just as I am aware that people often judge based on appearances rather than character." His eye narrowed, recognizing her subtle reference to his scars. "Indeed. Then we understand each other." He turned away. "Jenkins will show you to Mrs. Bailey's cottage. Good evening, Miss Keating." As he ascended the stairs, disappearing into the shadows from which he had emerged, Sophia realized she was trembling. There had been something in his voice beyond coldness, a profound loneliness that echoed her own. Cousin Eleanor's cottage proved to be a charming if modest dwelling on the edge of the estate. A widow of 50 with a pragmatic nature, she welcomed Sophia with a warm meal and minimal questions about her father's disgrace. "What's done is done," Eleanor said as they sat by the fire that evening. "The question is what you'll do now." "I had hoped to find another position as a governess," Sophia admitted. "Though that seems unlikely given the circumstances." Eleanor considered this. "Perhaps not in London, but here in Yorkshire, news travels more slowly." She paused. As it happens, I heard the Earl is seeking a companion for his daughter. Sophia nearly choked on her tea. Lord Ravenswood has a child. Lady Emily. 8 years old and wild as the moors. Eleanor sighed. Poor child. She lost her mother in the fire, and her father. She trailed off. Has he always been so? Sophia searched for the right word. Bitter? No. Eleanor shook her head sadly. Thomas Parnell was once the most charming gentleman in Yorkshire. He and Lady Ravenswood were devoted to each other. After the fire, he became a recluse. There are rumours, of course. What sort of rumours? That he started the fire himself in a fit of jealous rage. Eleanor lowered her voice. Lady Ravenswood was uncommonly beautiful, and there were whispers of indiscretions. Nothing substantiated, mind you. Sophia frowned. I cannot believe a man would harm his wife over mere rumours. Grief and guilt change people, my dear. Eleanor patted her hand. In any case, the position might suit you. The Earl pays generously, and you would have your own quarters in the East Wing. I doubt he would hire me, given my family circumstances. Perhaps. But the last 3 governesses left within a month. Lady Emily can be challenging. Eleanor smiled. I shall speak with Mrs. Hudson, the housekeeper, tomorrow. No harm in trying. That night, as Sophia lay in the small guest bed listening to the wind howl across the moors, she thought of the scarred Earl. What kind of man had he been before tragedy struck? And what kind of father was he to the daughter who had survived? More importantly, would he give her a chance to prove herself when the rest of society had already condemned her? 3 days later, Sophia found herself once again in the imposing entrance hall of Ravenswood Manor. Mrs. Hudson, a stern woman with kind eyes, had appeared at Eleanor's cottage that morning with an unexpected message. The Earl will see you regarding the governess position at 10 o'clock, she had announced. Come prepared to begin immediately if he approves. Now, as the clock struck 10, Sophia smoothed her plain grey dress and adjusted the simple locket at her throat, her mother's only legacy. She had brought her small valise, though she doubted Lord Ravenswood would hire her once he remembered the scandal attached to her name. The butler led her to a vast library where tall windows overlooked the wild gardens. Lord Ravenswood stood with his back to her, gazing out at the rain-swept landscape, his hands clasped behind him. Miss Keating, my lord, the butler announced before withdrawing. The Earl turned, his scarred face half hidden in shadow. Mrs. Bailey speaks highly of your qualifications. Sophia clasped her hands to keep them from trembling. My cousin is kind, but I assure you my references are genuine. I was governess to the Viscount Pembroke's daughters for 2 years. Until your father's crimes were discovered. His blunt statement hung in the air between them. Yes. Sophia refused to look away. I lost my position through no fault of my own, my lord. Just as my daughter lost her mother through no fault of hers. He moved toward his desk, retrieving a letter. I received this from Lady Pembroke yesterday. She cautions against employing you, suggesting your moral character must be suspect given your parentage. Sophia's heart sank. I see. Do you? He studied her with his one good eye. I find myself in a unique position to understand how appearances can deceive, Miss Keating. Society believes me a monster because of these. He gestured to his scars. Just as they believe you corrupt because of your father's sins. Sophia hadn't expected this perspective. Then you'll consider my application on its own merits. I already have. He set the letter aside. You're educated, experienced with children of good families, and according to your former employer, before she discovered your father's crimes, you have a gift for teaching difficult subjects with patience and clarity. Lady Pembroke was generous in her assessment. My daughter needs more than a teacher, Miss Keating. She needs someone who understands what it means to lose everything through circumstances beyond one's control. His voice softened slightly. Emily has driven away 3 governesses with her tantrums and tricks. The last one left in tears after Emily cut holes in all her dresses. Despite herself, Sophia smiled. She sounds spirited. She is angry, he corrected. And frightened. Her mother died when Emily was 3. She barely remembers her, yet carries the wound of her absence like an open sore. The candor of his assessment surprised her. Children often express grief through rebellion, my lord. And how do adults express it, Miss Keating? The question caught her off guard. Some withdraw, she said carefully. Others seek to punish themselves, or those around them. Something flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps. The position is yours if you want it. Quarters in the East Wing, 1 day off per week, and £30 per annum. Emily's education and welfare will be your sole responsibility. The salary was generous, far more than she had earned with the Pembrokes. Thank you, my lord. I accept. One condition. His tone hardened. You are never to ask about the fire or my wife. The past is buried, Miss Keating. Let it remain so. Lady Emily Parnell was nothing like Sophia had imagined. Instead of the wild, tantrum-throwing child Eleanor had described, Sophia found a solemn-faced girl with her father's piercing blue eyes and her late mother's golden curls, according to the portrait that hung in the great hall. "Are you going to leave too?" were the first words Emily spoke when Mrs. Hudson introduced them in the schoolroom. "That depends," Sophia replied honestly. "Are you planning to cut holes in my dresses?" The girl's eyes widened in surprise before narrowing with suspicion. "Father told you. He mentioned you have a creative approach to expressing your displeasure." Sophia set her books on the desk. "I prefer direct communication myself. If you dislike me or my methods, I hope you'll tell me plainly rather than destroying my wardrobe." A ghost of a smile touched the child's lips. Miss Harrington screamed when she found her dresses. It was most satisfying. I imagine it was. Sophia sat down across from her. "May I ask why you disliked her?" Emily studied her with an intensity reminiscent of her father. "She called me a poor dear and patted my head whenever she spoke of mother. As though I were a simple-minded puppy." Sophia nodded. "I dislike being patronized as well." "What's your tragic circumstance?" Emily asked abruptly. "I beg your pardon." "Father only hires people with sad stories. Mrs. Hudson's husband died in the war. Mr. Jenkins lost his son to fever." "What's yours?" The child was unnervingly perceptive. "My father committed a crime and went to prison. Society has decided that makes me unworthy of respect or employment." Emily considered this. "That's stupid. You didn't do anything wrong." "Neither did you," Sophia said gently. "Yet I imagine people treat you differently because of what happened to your mother." Emily's face clouded. "They whisper. They think I don't hear, but I do." She looked down at her hands. "They say father did it. That he killed her." Sophia's heart clenched. Children should not have to bear the weight of adult gossip. "Is that why father hides?" "Because of what people say." "I don't know your father well enough to answer that." Sophia hesitated, then added, "But sometimes when people are hurting, they find it easier to be alone than to face the world." He never comes to the village anymore. He never laughs. Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes I forget what he looked like before. When he was happy. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed the girl's hand. Perhaps we can help him remember. Over the following weeks, Sophia discovered that Emily was extraordinarily bright but woefully behind in her studies. The constant turnover of governesses had left gaps in her education that Sophia worked diligently to fill. Each evening, she wrote detailed reports of Emily's progress for Lord Ravenswood, though she rarely saw him. He seemed to move through the vast house like a ghost, appearing only at dinner, which he took alone in his study, and occasionally in the library late at night. One such night, nearly a month after her arrival, Sophia encountered him as she sought a book of poetry to help with Emily's literature lessons. "Miss Keating." His voice startled her as she reached for a volume on a high shelf. "It's rather late for academic pursuits." She turned to find him standing in the doorway, a glass of brandy in his hand. Emily expressed interest in Wordsworth, "My lord. I thought I might select some appropriate verses for tomorrow's lesson." "Try a lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey," he suggested, moving into the room. "I found it comforting after the fire." Sophia located the poem. "Nature as a healing force." An apt choice. "You've read it?" "Many times." She smiled slightly. "My father disapproved of poetry. He considered it a frivolous pursuit with no practical application. Yet you studied it anyway." "Some rebellions are quieter than others, my lord." A sound escaped him that might have been a chuckle. "Emily mentioned you've been teaching her chess. I hope you don't object. She has a natural aptitude for strategy." "I don't object." He hesitated. "I used to play with her before." "I haven't in some time." Sophia gathered her courage. "Perhaps you might join us tomorrow afternoon?" Emily would be delighted. His face darkened. "I doubt that. She can barely look at me." "With respect, my lord, that's because you rarely give her the opportunity." Sophia instantly regretted her boldness. "Forgive me. It's not my place." He studied her with that unnerving intensity. "You're not afraid to speak your mind, are you, Miss Keating?" "A failing of mine, I'm told." "Not a failing. A rarity." He set his glass down. "Very well. I shall join you for chess tomorrow at 3 o'clock. We shall see if your assessment of my daughter's feelings is accurate." The chess match proved to be a revelation. Initially stiff and formal, Lord Ravenswood gradually relaxed as Emily demonstrated her newfound skills. When she executed a clever move that trapped his knight, Sophia witnessed something she had begun to think impossible. The scarred Earl smiled. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines and bringing life to features that usually seemed carved from stone. Emily saw it too, her eyes widening with delight. "Father! You're smiling." His hand moved reflexively to cover the scarred side of his face, but Emily shook her head. "Don't hide. I like seeing you smile. It makes you look like before." Something shifted in the air between father and daughter, a crack in the wall that had separated them since tragedy struck. Lord Ravenswood reached across the chess table and gently touched Emily's cheek. "You remind me so much of her," he said softly. "Your mother had the same look of triumph whenever she bested me at chess." Emily beamed. "Did she win often?" "Constantly. She was ruthless." His voice held warmth that Sophia had never heard before. She would have been proud of that move. As Sophia quietly excused herself to give them privacy, she caught Lord Ravenswood's eye. The gratitude in his gaze stirred something unexpected within her, a connection that went beyond employer and governess. Later that evening, a note arrived with her dinner tray. "Miss Keating, your strategy proved more effective than mine. Emily has requested we make chess a weekly tradition. I find I cannot refuse her. With gratitude." T. Parnell. Autumn yielded to winter, and the grounds of Ravenswood were transformed by snow. Emily thrived under Sophia's tutelage, and the weekly chess matches with her father became the highlight of the child's week. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, Lord Ravenswood began to emerge from his self-imposed isolation. He joined them for afternoon walks when weather permitted. He listened to Emily's piano recitals. Once, Sophia even heard him laugh, a rusty sound, as though long unused, but genuine. For her part, Sophia found herself drawn to this complex, damaged man. Beneath his harsh exterior lay a keen intelligence and unexpected sensitivity. Their conversations about literature and music revealed a mind that matched her own in curiosity and depth. One snowy afternoon in December, as Emily practiced her scales in the music room, Lord Ravenswood invited Sophia to walk with him in the conservatory. "Emily tells me you've been teaching her about the language of flowers," he said as they strolled between rows of exotic blooms protected from the winter chill. "Yes, it's part of our botany lessons." Sophia admired a particularly vibrant orchid. "She's quite fascinated by the idea that flowers carry messages." "And what message would this one convey?" He indicated a deep red rose in full bloom. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "That depends on the shade, my lord. Deep red signifies unconscious beauty. And this?" He moved to a pale pink blossom. "Admiration. Grace." He nodded thoughtfully. "My wife loved the language of flowers. She planted the garden beyond the east wing with blooms chosen specifically for their meanings." It was the first time he had voluntarily mentioned Lady Ravenswood. Sophia treaded carefully. "It must be beautiful in spring." It was. His expression clouded. "I haven't maintained it. Another failure among many. Perhaps Emily might help restore it, come spring," Sophia suggested. "As part of her education." He considered this. "Perhaps." Then, abruptly, "You've changed her, Miss Keating. She smiles now. She speaks of the future rather than dwelling in the past. Children are remarkably resilient when given the chance to heal." "And what of adults?" His eye met hers. "Is there healing for those of us who bear more responsibility for our wounds?" The question seemed to contain layers of meaning beyond the obvious. "I believe healing is possible for anyone willing to seek it," she answered carefully. "Though the path may be different for each person." He turned away, moving toward a white camellia. "I dismissed the doctor who suggested I might have the scars revised. I told him I deserved to wear the evidence of my failure." Sophia's heart ached at this confession. "Is that truly what you believe? That your scars are punishment? Aren't they?" His voice was barely audible. "I failed to save her. I should have reached her room faster, should have found her in the smoke." "You nearly died trying," Sophia said gently. "Mrs. Hudson told me you ran back into the burning house 3 times. Not enough." His hand clenched at his side. "Never enough." Without thinking, Sophia reached out and touched his arm. "You saved Emily. That must count for something." He stared at her hand on his sleeve, then slowly covered it with his own. The touch sent warmth spreading through her despite the lingering chill of the conservatory. "You are an unusual woman, Sophia Keating." He rarely used her first name, and it sounded intimate on his lips. "Most people can barely look at me without flinching, yet you speak to me as though I were whole." Perhaps because I see you that way, she answered honestly. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability that made him appear younger. For a moment, Sophia thought he might say more, might even move closer. Then, as if catching himself, he stepped back. We should return to Emily. She'll be wondering where we are. As they walked back to the house, Sophia was acutely aware of the moment that had passed between them, a connection that frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. The Christmas season brought unexpected joy to Ravenswood Manor. At Emily's insistence, Lord Ravenswood agreed to host a small gathering, just the three of them, Cousin Eleanor, Mrs. Hudson, and a few of the senior staff. Sophia helped Emily decorate a towering fir in the great hall, and the child's excitement proved contagious. Even Lord Ravenswood contributed, unearthing delicate ornaments from storage that had belonged to his late wife. Mother loved Christmas, Emily confided to Sophia as they hung silver stars. Father says she would make everyone sing carols, even if they couldn't carry a tune. She sounds delightful. She was. Lord Ravenswood's voice came from behind them. He held a small wooden box in his hands. She commissioned this the Christmas before she died. He opened it to reveal an exquisite angel carved from ivory. It was to be a surprise. It's beautiful, Sophia murmured. I couldn't bear to display it after, but perhaps it's time. He handed the angel to Emily. Would you like to place it on the tree? Emily took it reverently. Together, Father. He hesitated, then nodded. Lifting Emily in his arms, he held her up to place the angel at the top of the tree. The child's delighted laugh echoed through the great hall, and Sophia saw tears glistening in the Earl's eye. That evening, after Emily had gone to bed full of Christmas pudding and excitement, Sophia found herself alone with Lord Ravenswood in the library. A fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm glow over the room. Thank you, he said simply. This is the first Christmas since the fire that hasn't felt like an exercise in endurance. Emily deserves happy memories, Sophia replied. As do you. He poured 2 glasses of brandy, offering one to her. I've received an invitation from Lady Harrington. A New Year's gathering at Harrington Hall. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. I'm considering accepting. Sophia couldn't hide her surprise. That would be wonderful. For both you and Emily. It would mean facing society again. The stares. The whispers. He touched his scarred cheek unconsciously. I'm not certain I'm prepared for that. Those who matter won't be troubled by your scars, Sophia said gently. And those who are troubled by them don't matter. He smiled faintly. A convenient philosophy, but society rarely operates on such enlightened principles. He studied her. Would you accompany us? As Emily's governess, of course. The invitation caught her off guard. I would be honored, but my presence might create more gossip, not less. The scandal of my father's crimes is still fresh. Let them gossip about both of us, then. There was a defiance in his voice that reminded her of the proud, confident man he must have been before tragedy struck. Perhaps we can face society's judgment together. The way he looked at her, with warmth and something deeper, made Sophia's heart race. Together, she agreed softly. New Year's Eve arrived with swirling snow and nervous anticipation. Sophia helped Emily prepare for her first formal gathering, arranging the child's golden curls and adjusting the sash on her new green velvet dress. Will people stare at Father? Emily asked as Sophia fastened a small locket around her neck. Some might, Sophia answered honestly. But a true lady doesn't notice such rudeness. Emily nodded solemnly. I shall be very proper and pretend not to see if anyone is unkind. That's my brave girl. Sophia's own preparations were more modest. Her grey silk, her one good dress, was simple but elegant, with a neckline that revealed the delicate locket that had been her mother's. When Lord Ravenswood met them in the entrance hall, Sophia's breath caught. He cut a striking figure in formal evening wear, his dark hair neatly combed, his bearing aristocratic despite the scars. He had chosen not to hide them behind a mask, though the black eye patch remained. "You both look lovely," he said, his gaze lingering on Sophia. The journey to Harrington Hall passed in tense silence. As the carriage approached the brightly lit mansion, Lord Ravenswood's jaw tightened. "We can still turn back," Sophia offered quietly. He shook his head. "No. It's time." He looked at his daughter. "For Emily's sake, if not my own." Lady Harrington, a plump, good-natured widow with a fondness for gossip, greeted them at the entrance with only the briefest flicker of surprise crossing her features. "Thomas! How wonderful to see you after so long." She kissed his cheek, both sides, Sophia noted, without hesitation. "And this must be Emily. How you've grown, child." "And Miss Keating," Sophia supplied with a curtsy. "Emily's governess." "Ah, yes." Lady Harrington's eyes narrowed slightly in recognition of the name, but she merely smiled. "Welcome to Harrington Hall. The dancing has just begun in the ballroom." As they entered, conversations faltered and heads turned. Lord Ravenswood stood straighter, his hand protectively on Emily's shoulder. The music continued, but the atmosphere had undeniably shifted. Then Lady Harrington's booming voice cut through the awkward silence. "Lord Montgomery! You owe me a dance, sir. And someone fetch Lord Ravenswood a drink, don't stand there gawking like you've never seen a handsome man before." The spell broken, guests returned to their conversations, though Sophia noticed many curious glances still directed their way. Emily was quickly whisked off by Lady Harrington's granddaughter to meet other children, leaving Sophia and Lord Ravenswood standing somewhat awkwardly at the edge of the ballroom. "Shall we circulate?" Sophia suggested. "Or would you prefer to find a quiet corner?" Before he could answer, a striking woman in a crimson gown approached. "Thomas Parnell. The prodigal Earl returns at last." Lord Ravenswood stiffened. "Lady Westmoreland. You look well. Better than you, darling." Her eyes travelled over his scars without subtlety. "Though the mysterious, wounded look rather suits you." Sophia instantly disliked the woman. There was something predatory in her assessment. "May I present Miss Keating, my daughter's governess," Lord Ravenswood said, his tone clipped. Lady Westmoreland barely glanced at Sophia. "Charming. Thomas, you must save me a dance. For old time's sake." As she sauntered away, Sophia noticed Lord Ravenswood's troubled expression. "An old friend?" she inquired carefully. "Victoria Westmoreland was my wife's cousin," he replied. "And a frequent visitor to Ravenswood before the fire." Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, but Sophia didn't press. Throughout the evening, she observed Lady Westmoreland watching Lord Ravenswood with calculating eyes, always finding reasons to touch his arm or whisper in his ear when she approached. Despite the occasional awkward encounter, the evening progressed better than Sophia had feared. Emily charmed everyone she met, and Lord Ravenswood gradually relaxed as he reconnected with old acquaintances who seemed genuinely pleased to see him. Near midnight, as guests gathered for the countdown to the new year, Sophia found herself momentarily alone. Emily was with the other children, and Lord Ravenswood had been drawn into conversation with several gentlemen. "Miss Keating, isn't it?" Lady Westmoreland materialized beside her. "The governess with the notorious father." Sophia maintained her composure. Yes, Lady Westmoreland. How convenient for you, finding employment with a reclusive, damaged widower. Her smile was venomous. Thomas always did have a weakness for strays and lost causes. Lord Ravenswood employed me for my qualifications, not my circumstances, Sophia replied evenly. Lady Westmoreland laughed. Of course he did. Tell me, does he still blame himself for Catherine's death? He was always so tediously honourable about it all. Something in her tone raised Sophia's suspicions. You speak as though there were something dishonourable in his grief. Grief? Lady Westmoreland's eyes glittered. Is that what he calls it? Interesting. She leaned closer. You should ask him what really happened the night of the fire. Ask him where he was when it started. Ask him why Catherine was alone in the East Wing. Before Sophia could respond, the Countess melted back into the crowd as Lord Ravenswood approached. There you are, he said, looking troubled. Is everything all right? Victoria looked pleased with herself. She was merely being conversational, Sophia lied, unwilling to repeat the woman's insinuations. It's nearly midnight. As the clock struck 12 and cheers erupted around them, Lord Ravenswood's hand found hers in the crowd. Happy New Year, Sophia, he said softly. Happy New Year, my lord. She squeezed his hand, pushing Lady Westmoreland's words from her mind. But as they returned to Ravenswood in the early hours of the morning, Emily asleep against her father's shoulder in the carriage, Sophia couldn't help wondering what secrets still lingered in the shadows of the past. January brought heavy snow that blanketed Ravenswood in pristine white. The isolation might have felt oppressive months earlier, but now it created an intimate cocoon around the three of them, lord, daughter, and governess, forming an unconventional family unit. Lord Ravenswood, Thomas, as he had asked Sophia to call him in private, joined them daily now. He read aloud while Emily practiced her needlework. He supervised riding lessons in the indoor arena. In the evenings, after Emily had gone to bed, he and Sophia would often spend hours in the library discussing books, music, and increasingly, their personal histories. Did you always wish to be a governess? He asked one snowy evening as they sat before the fire. Sophia smiled. Not at all. I had dreams of university, actually. My mother had been a scholar's daughter, and she fostered a love of learning in me. What prevented you? My father's financial mismanagement began long before his crimes were discovered. By the time I was 18, there was barely enough money for necessities, let alone education. She stared into the flames. Teaching became the only respectable option available to me. You would have excelled at university, he said with conviction. Your mind is remarkable, questioning, thorough, yet imaginative. The compliment warmed her more than the fire. And you? Did you always know you would be the Earl of Ravenswood? I was the second son, actually. My brother Philip was the heir. A shadow crossed his face. He died of typhoid when I was 22. I was studying architecture in Italy at the time. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. He traced the rim of his glass with his finger. I met Catherine in London during my first season as the Earl. She was dazzling. Beautiful, vivacious, always the center of attention. It was rare for him to speak of his late wife. Sophia remained silent, afraid that any comment might stop his confidences. We were happy, I think, in the beginning. His voice softened. Emily's birth was a miracle. Catherine had been told she might never conceive. His expression darkened. After that, things changed. Catherine became restless, dissatisfied with country life. She spent more and more time in London without me. That must have been difficult. I told myself she needed society, parties, admirers, excitement. He stared into his brandy. I told myself her frequent absences meant nothing. That the rumors were merely jealous gossip. Sophia's mind flashed to Lady Westmoreland's insinuations. What rumors? He seemed to catch himself, as though he had said more than he intended. It doesn't matter now. The past is buried, as I told you when you first arrived. But something had shifted. The comfortable intimacy of moments before had evaporated, replaced by a tension that hung heavy in the air. Forgive me, Sophia said quietly. I didn't mean to pry. No, he set his glass down and stood. It's late. I should let you rest. As he left, Sophia remained by the fire, troubled by the abrupt end to their conversation. Whatever ghosts haunted Thomas Parnell, they were not as firmly buried as he wished to believe. The following weeks brought a subtle change in their interactions. Thomas remained attentive to Emily, but he seemed to be creating distance between himself and Sophia. Their evening conversations became less frequent, less personal. When their fingers accidentally touched as they both reached for the same book, he withdrew as if burned. Sophia told herself it was for the best. She was, after all, only the governess, an employee with a tarnished family name and no prospects beyond her current position. Whatever connection had been growing between them could lead nowhere but heartache. Yet her heart refused to listen to such rational arguments. In the quiet hours of the night, she admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for months: she was in love with Thomas Parnell, not despite his scars, but including them as part of the complex, honorable man she had come to know. As January gave way to February, a letter arrived that disrupted the fragile peace of Ravenswood. Sophia was teaching Emily about Roman history when Mrs. Hudson appeared at the schoolroom door. Pardon the interruption, Miss Keating, but the Earl requests your presence in the library immediately. Emily looked up with concern. Is something wrong, Mrs. Hudson? Nothing for you to worry about, Lady Emily. Continue your studies. The housekeeper's expression, however, belied her reassuring words. Sophia found Thomas pacing before the fireplace, a letter crushed in his fist. He turned as she entered, his face a mask of controlled fury. My lord? Mrs. Hudson said you wished to see me. Did you know about this? He thrust the letter toward her. Sophia took it with trembling hands and read, My Lord Ravenswood, it has come to my attention that you have employed Miss Sophia Keating as governess to your daughter. While I hesitate to interfere in the domestic arrangements of others, I feel compelled by Christian duty to warn you of this woman's character. Not only is she the daughter of a convicted thief, but she was dismissed from the Pembroke household under circumstances more scandalous than mere association with her father's crimes. Lady Pembroke discovered Miss Keating engaged in improper relations with Lord Pembroke himself, a fact she concealed out of regard for her husband's reputation. I relay this information with the greatest reluctance, but concern for your daughter's moral education must outweigh delicacy. Your obedient servant. Lady Victoria Westmoreland. Sophia's hands shook with indignation. This is utterly false. Lord Pembroke never, I would never, she struggled to find words through her shock and anger. So you deny it? Thomas's voice was cold. Absolutely. Lady Westmoreland has invented this slander from whole cloth. Sophia fought to control her emotions. I was dismissed solely because of my father's disgrace. Lady Pembroke herself was kind enough to provide a character reference. Then why would Lady Westmoreland make such an accusation? The question struck Sophia like a physical blow. He doubted her. After all they had shared, all the trust they had built, he could still believe her capable of such behavior. Perhaps you should ask what motivation Lady Westmoreland might have to drive a wedge between us, she said quietly. His eye narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that she seems unusually interested in your affairs for a mere cousin by marriage. Sophia gathered her courage. At the New Year's gathering, she implied there was more to the night of the fire than you've admitted. Thomas went completely still. What did she say to you? She suggested I ask you where you were when the fire started. Why your wife was alone in the East Wing. Sophia held his gaze. I didn't ask because I trusted you. Because I believed whatever happened that night was your burden to share or keep as you chose. And now? His voice was barely audible. Now I wonder if your willingness to believe the worst of me comes from knowing what it's like to be falsely accused. She placed the letter on the desk. Or perhaps from guilt over something that was true. The moment the words left her mouth, Sophia knew she had gone too far. Thomas's face drained of color, the scar tissue standing out in stark relief against his pale skin. You are dismissed, Miss Keating. His voice was flat, emotionless. You will pack your things and leave Ravenswood by nightfall. Sophia felt as though she'd been struck. My lord, I trusted you with my daughter. With my home. His voice cracked slightly. With parts of myself I have shared with no one since Catherine died. And you repay that trust with these insinuations. Thomas, please, do not use my given name. He turned away. Mrs. Hudson will provide you with a month's wages and arrange transportation to your cousin's cottage. Devastated, Sophia could only curtsy stiffly before leaving the library. As she closed the door behind her, she heard the sound of breaking glass, as though something had been hurled against the wall in rage or grief. Telling Emily was the hardest part. The child's eyes filled with tears as Sophia explained that she would be leaving. But why? Did I do something wrong? Did father dismiss you because of me? No, darling. Sophia held Emily's hands in hers. Sometimes adults disagree about important matters. Your father and I had such a disagreement. Can't you apologize? Or can't he? Emily's lip trembled. I don't want you to go. Neither do I. Sophia brushed a tear from the girl's cheek. But sometimes, even when people care for each other very much, pride and hurt feelings get in the way of reconciliation. He was happier with you here, Emily said with a child's blunt honesty. We both were. Sophia blinked back tears of her own. I want you to promise me something. Keep playing chess with your father. Keep telling him about your day, your thoughts, your dreams. He needs you as much as you need him. Emily threw her arms around Sophia's neck. I'll write to you. Every week. I would like that very much. Sophia held the child close, memorizing the feel of her small body, the scent of her hair. You are going to grow into an extraordinary woman, Emily Parnell. I am so proud to have been your teacher, even for a little while. By late afternoon, Sophia's few possessions were packed. She wrote a letter for Emily, to be opened on her next birthday, and another for Thomas that she knew he would likely destroy unread. Mrs. Hudson, who had been kind throughout the painful day, promised to deliver them both. As twilight fell, Sophia took one last walk through the gardens where she had spent so many happy hours with Emily. Snow still covered much of the ground, but the first crocuses were pushing through in sheltered spots, promise of a spring she would not see at Ravenswood. Miss Keating. The voice startled her. Mrs. Hudson stood at the garden gate, her expression grave. The carriage is ready. Thank you. Sophia took a deep breath, inhaling the cold, clean air of Ravenswood one last time. I'm ready. As the carriage pulled away from the house, Sophia allowed herself one backward glance. A lone figure stood at the library window, Thomas, watching her departure, his expression unreadable at this distance. She turned away, tears blurring her vision, as Ravenswood Manor disappeared behind the snow-covered trees. Cousin Eleanor welcomed Sophia with open arms and minimal questions. The small cottage felt confining after the grandeur of Ravenswood, but Sophia was grateful for the roof over her head and the quiet understanding her cousin provided. "He'll come to his senses," Eleanor predicted after Sophia explained what had happened. "That man was half in love with you at Christmas. Anyone with eyes could see it. It doesn't matter now." Sophia stared into the fire. His pride won't allow him to admit he was wrong. Pride has been the downfall of the Parnell men for generations. Eleanor sighed. His father was the same, stubborn as a mule when he thought his honor was at stake. The days stretched into weeks. True to her word, Emily wrote faithfully, her childish scrawl detailing her lessons with the new governess, not nearly as interesting as Sophia's, her father's moods, often dark, and her hope that Sophia would return, unwavering. Sophia replied with equal faithfulness, though she knew Thomas probably read the letters before they reached his daughter. She kept her responses cheerful and educational, suggesting books Emily might enjoy and answering her questions about everything from Greek mythology to the migration patterns of swallows. Of Thomas, there was no direct word. Through Emily's letters, Sophia learned that he had withdrawn again, spending long hours in his study and taking most meals alone. March arrived with warming temperatures and the need to find new employment. Sophia wrote to several agencies, but received the same response each time: her father's disgrace made her unsuitable for positions with respectable families. "You could try the village school," Eleanor suggested one morning as Sophia read yet another rejection letter. "Mr. Peters mentioned they need an assistant teacher. The position would pay barely enough to survive, but it would allow Sophia to remain near Emily. I'll inquire tomorrow," she decided. That afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at the cottage. Mrs. Hudson, looking somewhat uncomfortable in her Sunday best, sat primly in Eleanor's sitting room. "The Earl doesn't know I've come," she said after declining tea. "I felt it necessary to speak with you privately, Miss Keating." Sophia's heart raced. "Is Emily well?" "Lady Emily is in good health, though she misses you terribly." Mrs. Hudson twisted her gloved hands in her lap. "It's his lordship I'm concerned about." "What's happened?" "He received a visitor yesterday, Lady Westmoreland." Mrs. Hudson's expression soured. She arrived unannounced and insisted on speaking with him privately. Their conversation was heated. After she left, his lordship locked himself in his study with a decanter of brandy. He emerged this morning looking as though he hadn't slept. Sophia frowned. "I'm sorry to hear it, but I don't see how this concerns me." Before she departed, Lady Westmoreland made a rather triumphant comment to me. Mrs. Hudson hesitated. She said, "Tell Emily to prepare for a new mother. The Earl has finally seen reason." Sophia felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. "She expects him to propose." I believe that was her implication, yes. Mrs. Hudson looked genuinely distressed. "Miss Keating, I have served the Parnell family for 30 years. I was there when Lady Catherine brought shame upon the house with her indiscretions. I was there the night of the fire." "Indiscretions?" Sophia echoed. "Lady Catherine was not faithful to his lordship." Mrs. Hudson spoke bluntly now. Her affair with Lord Westmoreland was an open secret among the staff, though the Earl refused to acknowledge it for years. "Lord Westmoreland?" "Lady Victoria's husband." Mrs. Hudson nodded grimly. The Earl finally confronted his wife the night of the fire. There was a terrible argument. He left to clear his head, and while he was gone. She closed her eyes briefly. The fire started in Lady Catherine's bedchamber. A candle knocked over in her haste to pack, we believe. She was planning to leave him that night. Dear God! Sophia understood now. The guilt that consumed him went beyond failing to save his wife. He blamed himself for the argument that had precipitated her actions. His lordship nearly died trying to reach her through the flames. When he couldn't. Mrs. Hudson shook her head. He has carried that guilt for 5 years, Miss Keating. The scars on his face are nothing compared to those on his soul. And Lady Westmoreland? What is her role in all this? She was always jealous of her cousin, of her beauty, her title, her marriage. After Catherine died and Lord Westmoreland passed away the following year, she set her sights on the Earl. Mrs. Hudson's expression hardened. I believe she wrote that slanderous letter about you because she saw how he was changing in your presence. How he was healing. Sophia struggled to absorb these revelations. Why are you telling me this now? Because I cannot stand by and watch Lady Westmoreland manipulate her way into Ravenswood through his lordship's guilt and isolation. Mrs. Hudson rose to leave. What you choose to do with this information is, of course, entirely your decision. After Mrs. Hudson departed, Sophia sat motionless by the window, watching darkness fall over the moor as she contemplated what she had learned. The pieces of the puzzle that was Thomas Parnell finally fit together, his self-imposed isolation, his reluctance to speak of his wife, the guilt that seemed disproportionate even for a man who had failed to save his spouse from a fire. He had been betrayed by the woman he loved, confronted her, and then lost her forever before any resolution could be reached. No wonder he had reacted so violently to Lady Westmoreland's accusations about Sophia. They had triggered his deepest wounds. "What will you do?" Eleanor asked quietly, having overheard much of Mrs. Hudson's visit. Sophia turned from the window. "I don't know. He made his choice when he believed Lady Westmoreland's lies without giving me a chance to defend myself." "Did he?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Or did he make the only choice a man consumed by guilt and fear could make? The safe choice, to push away someone who was beginning to matter too much. That doesn't excuse his lack of trust." "No," Eleanor agreed. "But it might explain it." Sophia spent a restless night weighing her options. By morning, she had made her decision. If Thomas was indeed considering marriage to Lady Westmoreland, whether from guilt, manipulation, or genuine affection, it was not Sophia's place to interfere. But she would not leave Emily unprotected against that woman's influence. She penned a brief note to Thomas. "My lord, I understand Lady Westmoreland has returned to Ravenswood. While our parting was bitter, I hope we can agree that Emily's welfare must remain paramount. If there is to be a change in her household, I request the opportunity to speak with you about her education and emotional needs before I depart Yorkshire permanently. I remain your daughter's devoted teacher." Sophia Keating. The response came the same day, a single line in Thomas's distinctive handwriting, "Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. The library." Ravenswood Manor looked unchanged as Sophia approached the following afternoon, yet everything felt different. Her heart pounded as the butler admitted her and led her to the familiar library. Thomas stood by the window, his back to her as it had been during their first meeting months ago. He turned as the door closed, and Sophia was shocked by his appearance. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eye and new lines etched around his mouth. "Miss Keating." His voice was formal, controlled. "Thank you for coming." "My lord." She curtsied, maintaining the distance he had established. "I appreciate your willingness to meet. Your note mentioned concerns about Emily's future." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Sophia remained standing. "I'll be direct, my lord. I understand Lady Westmoreland may soon become a permanent fixture at Ravenswood. While it is not my place to comment on your personal choices, I feel obligated to express concern about her influence on Emily." Thomas frowned. "What gives you that impression?" Lady Westmoreland herself implied as much to Mrs. Hudson. A bark of humorless laughter escaped him. "Did she indeed? How presumptuous!" He moved to the sideboard and poured himself a drink. "I have no intention of marrying Victoria Westmoreland or anyone else." Relief flooded through Sophia, though she tried not to show it. "I'm glad to hear it. For Emily's sake." "Are you?" He studied her over the rim of his glass. "Is it only for Emily's sake that you care about my marital prospects?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. I wish for your happiness, my lord. Whatever form that might take. My happiness." He set the glass down untouched. "Do you know what Victoria revealed during her visit? The true reason for her slanderous letter about you?" Sophia shook her head. "She confessed to inventing the entire story because she saw how I looked at you at the New Year's gathering." His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "She said, and I quote, 'You never looked at Catherine that way, even in the beginning.'" Sophia's breath caught. "And how did you look at me?" "Like a drowning man who had finally found solid ground." He took a step toward her. "Like a man seeing color after years of darkness." "Thomas, I believed her lies because they confirmed my deepest fear, that I did not deserve the happiness you brought into my life." His voice dropped to a whisper. "That I would lose you as I lost Catherine, but this time to my own failings rather than hers." "Mrs. Hudson told me about your wife," Sophia said gently. "About Lord Westmoreland." Pain flashed across his face. "Then you know the full measure of my failure. I was so absorbed in my work, my responsibilities to the estate, that I didn't see her unhappiness until it was too late. The night of the fire, I told her I knew about the affair. I gave her an ultimatum, end it or leave. I walked out before she could answer. You couldn't have known what would happen. When I saw the flames..." His voice broke. "I ran back for her, but the east wing was already engulfed. I tried 3 times to reach her room before the servants dragged me out. They said I was calling her name even as I lost consciousness." Sophia moved closer, drawn by his pain. "You nearly died trying to save her?" "I didn't want to live. Not after I realized what my pride and anger had cost Emily." He touched his scarred cheek. "These were my penance. My reminder." "And Lady Westmoreland? What was her role in all this?" "Victoria encouraged Catherine's discontent. She was always there with tales of London's excitement, introductions to men who flattered and pursued her cousin." His expression hardened. "Including her own husband. After they both died, she appointed herself my conscience, a constant reminder of my failures as a husband." "That's monstrous." "Is it? Or merely the justice I deserved?" He shook his head. "I believed that for years. Until you arrived at Ravenswood." "What changed?" "Everything." His gaze met hers, intense and vulnerable. "You saw beyond these scars, not just the visible ones, but those I carried inside. You brought Emily back to me. You made me remember what it meant to hope for a future instead of atoning for the past." Sophia's heart thundered in her chest. "Thomas, I was a coward when I sent you away." He took her hands in his. "I believed Victoria's lies because they gave me permission to retreat back into isolation, back to the pain I understood rather than risk the joy I didn't believe I deserved." "And now?" Sophia could barely breathe. Now I know that the true failure would be to let fear keep me from love a second time. His hands tightened on hers. I love you, Sophia Keating. Not despite your family's disgrace, but including it as part of what made you the compassionate, resilient woman you are. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I never thought I would hear those words. Never thought I could be loved for who I am rather than judged for my father's sins. Then we have both been blind to our own worth. He raised a hand to her cheek. Can you forgive my lack of faith in you? My cowardice. Instead of answering, Sophia rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. She felt him stiffen in surprise before his arms encircled her, drawing her closer. The kiss deepened, conveying everything words could not: forgiveness, longing, promise. When they finally parted, breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? It's a beginning. Sophia smiled through her tears. We both have healing still to do, Thomas. Old fears to overcome. We'll face them together. He kissed her again, softly this time. Stay at Ravenswood. Not as Emily's governess, but as my wife. If you'll have me. What will people say? Sophia couldn't help asking. The scarred earl and the disgraced governess. Let them talk. Thomas smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his face. We know the truth of who we are. Spring arrived at Ravenswood in a riot of colour as crocuses gave way to daffodils, then tulips, and finally roses. The East Wing garden, neglected for 5 years, bloomed again under the care of Emily and Sophia. They were married in the village church on a perfect May morning, with Emily proudly serving as maid of honour. Cousin Eleanor wept unabashedly, and even Mrs. Hudson was seen dabbing at her eyes during the ceremony. Society gossips had a field day, of course. The London papers carried snide reports of the misalliance between the reclusive Earl of Ravenswood and his daughter's governess, a woman of questionable origins and more questionable influence over the bereaved nobleman. Thomas merely laughed when he read them. They'll find some new scandal soon enough. On their wedding night, as moonlight spilled through the windows of the West Wing master chamber, Sophia traced the scars on her husband's face with gentle fingers. Does it bother you, he asked, that they'll never fade completely? No. She kissed each ridge and hollow. They're part of your story. Part of what brought us together. My beautiful, wise countess. He drew her into his arms. Do you know what these past months have taught me? What? That some wounds are meant to heal, even if they leave marks. He kissed her with tender passion. And that love doesn't demand perfection, only truth. As they lost themselves in each other, the ghosts of the past finally retreated, unable to withstand the power of the present and the promise of the future. In the years that followed, visitors to Ravenswood often remarked on the transformation of the once gloomy estate. Gardens bloomed where weeds had grown. Music and laughter echoed through halls that had known only silence. The Earl's scars remained, but few noticed them anymore, not when his smile came so readily, especially in the presence of his wife and growing family. And if anyone dared whisper about the Countess's disgraced parentage, they were swiftly silenced by the Earl's loyal tenants and servants, who knew the truth, that Sophia Keating Parnell had healed not just a wounded man, but an entire household with nothing more powerful than her belief that love could overcome even the deepest scars, those seen and unseen.